And I use the term marginalized with intention here. And I differentiate marginalized with underrepresented as well, which we've been using interchangeably, but I think it's really important for us to pause and unpack what those two words actually mean. And I use the word marginalized explicitly because I want to talk about people who are often on the margins, who often are left without actual institutional power to create change, and who are often the most likely folks to experience some type of exclusion and alienation in the workplace. As opposed to underrepresented people, where we're literally talking about representation numbers. And I distinguish that because, in the case of Asian Americans, for example, we are seen as overrepresented in the tech industry. And yet, we still happen to be the least likely group to advance to senior level positions. So it's important for us to unpack the differences between underrepresentation and marginalization so that we can actually build coalition and solidarity and working together to unpack what are all the struggles that we are experiencing as different types of communities as we come together. And it's really also important to, when I mention Asian Americans, there's also a lot of complicated, complex identities that are packed under that umbrella of Asian Americans. And there's a lot of Asian Americans who are not represented when we talk about overrepresentation of Asian Americans, because there are, believe it or not, a lot of Southeast Asian Americans who are not represented in those numbers and who are constantly getting erased, and their issues are not being at the forefront. So, with all that unpacking, how do we actually center marginalized people's needs? For too long, we've been focused on the diversity reports, gathering all the different types of people in the room so we can report out on how diverse we are. We're now talking about inclusion more and more, which is very important because now we've got to focus on the actual experiences of marginalized people in the workplace when they get there, right? So in order for us to center on marginalized people's needs, we have to be very intentional about that. Because of how we've been measuring success in the past, sometimes we forget that we need to really prioritize the people that we're trying to serve in order to measure whether or not a program or initiative succeeded. So why hear a lot of folks talking about how do we actually do this? So we have a very simple framework that we share during our Awaken workshops that we facilitate conversations around how do we actually prioritize marginalized people's needs. We first start by identifying what is the intended purpose of the actual initiative or the program. So I'm going to use an example to walk you through this framework. One of our clients launched an amazing benefit to their employee base. What they wanted to do was celebrate the employees who have been with them for over a year by awarding them with the opportunity to book a round-trip airfare to anywhere in the world. Pretty cool, yes? Some skepticism there. So what is the intended purpose of that benefit? It was to reward employees who have been with them for a long time. They wanted to encourage retention, and they also wanted to show how much they appreciate them by allowing them to go travel outside of the country. Well, they made a lot of different assumptions about this benefit, right? Mainly, who gets to actually enjoy this benefit? Who might be feeling alienated by the benefit that they may not be able to take advantage of? So when we actually unpack who does it benefit in reality and in theory, we can start to dissect where these assumptions start to create some tension. And very importantly, who does this actually burden? And who does this harm? So when I'm thinking about this benefit of being able to travel anywhere outside the country, we're making some big assumptions and leaving out folks who may not have documentation to be able to travel outside the country, who may be restricted by certain visa requirements. We may be restricting people who may not have the additional financial means to just go outside and book another vacation. We might be alienating people who might have caregiving responsibilities, who can't just leave people that they're caring for and travel outside the country.